Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about They Cloned Tyrone. They Cloned Tyrone is an American sci-fi mystery comedy that tells the story of Fontaine, a drug dealer trying to make a living in the impoverished neighborhood known as the Glen. After obtaining money from a local pimp named Slick Charles, he's shot and killed by a rival drug dealer, only to mysteriously turn up alive the next day. This startles Charles and one of his sex workers, Yo-Yo, who decide to work with Fontaine to find out what happened to him. As they investigate, they gradually uncover a cloning conspiracy that will turn out bigger than any of them could ever imagine. This is one of the most refreshingly original films Netflix has come out with this year, and the movie is just as fun to watch. While it has some technical issues and the story doesn't always make sense, the chemistry of the cast and its unique blending of genre elements and homages help make up for it. John Boyega plays the lead role of Fontaine and does a good job in doing so. I admit that he took a while to grow on me because of his constant stoicism, but it eventually made sense. He feels like the only character in the movie that can take things seriously in a cinematic world like this with so much craziness in it. He's a regular guy trying to get by in life even if it isn't through the most ethical way possible, and he deals with the pain of losing his little brother under the surface. This gives him a more grounded everyman persona that helps the audience put them in his shoes, and I enjoyed seeing his character grow and mature over the course of the story as he starts to realize the gravity of the situation that he's involved himself in. The rest of the characters are way different from him in terms of personality, though that's definitely not a bad thing. Teyonah Parris is great as the sassy sex worker Yo-Yo who tries to keep the male characters under control, and Jamie Foxx as Slick Charles, oh my god, he was amazing. Honestly, he was the best character in the movie for me. He's basically the polar opposite of Fontaine in terms of how loony he is. Every single line of dialogue he has is funny and memorable, and he still contributes to solving the mystery without coming off as a complete clown. Individually, these characters are fun in their own way, but it's the chemistry of these characters and the actors who portray them that make the movie work as well as it does. There's something about how serious Fontaine is and how silly the others are that just works. Every character in the group plays to each other's strengths, and all play a part in helping to make sense of what's going on around them. Though things between them can be exaggerated, the movie is still able to rein things in at the right time and focus on the story at hand. And what a crazy story it ended up being, too. The whole mystery behind the cloning conspiracy that Fontaine finds himself in is much better and well thought than I expected it to be, as it manages to surpass the insanity of the premise and everything surrounding it, and is actually well paced and has a lot of suspense behind it. Clues are appropriately laid out in interesting ways, and the characters come to realizations that never feel forced or phony in execution. I feel this is a hard thing to pull off in any mystery movie, so the fact that it's done so well in a movie as wild as this one is a true testament to how well it's written. Now, there were times while watching that I felt a bit lost as to what exactly was happening story-wise. Perhaps it's a consequence of all the different things that are happening at any given moment between the characters themselves and the world they inhabit, but there were moments where tonal shifts and general unevenness took me out of the movie. Thankfully, this doesn't happen too much, as the movie remained consistently entertaining throughout. Of all the comedies that I've seen this year, this is definitely the funniest one I've seen so far, and much of that is because of the dialogue. It feels like characters always have something witty to say in just about every scene, and none of the lines ever come off as cringeworthy. Of course, the movie does know when to pull the brakes and lay off the humor at certain times, but the dialogue is still a blast. Just hearing Slick Charles bicker with everyone around him is worth the price of admission alone. The funniest line in the movie for me isn't even said by any of the three main characters. When Fontaine goes back to investigate a cloning lab, only to find it's not there anymore, one of his buddies asks him if he wants a glass of water to calm down, and he keeps going on and on about how important hydration is, and it just cracked me up. Everything about this movie defines the word absurd. It literally involves an ordinary man in Fontaine finding himself in an absurd scenario that no one could possibly believe in a world that is absurd in its own unique way, and it's a ton of fun to see these things come together. One moment a character might be raving about a Kevin Bacon movie, and the next someone will be dancing feverishly to a Michael Jackson song, and in the next people will be laughing their butts off while eating fried chicken. I never knew what to expect at any point when watching this movie, and this kept me invested to see what crazy thing would happen next. Like I said though, the movie knows when to slow things down. Fontaine seems to be the only character who isn't in on things aside from the conspiracy. While everyone else is carrying on with smiles on their faces or getting caught up in their own silly drama, he feels angry and resentful about being trapped in the Glen, and his feelings are completely justified. At times, the mystery seems more about finding a way to escape and live a better life than actually figuring out who's behind the cloning. Of course, the cloning still takes precedence, and it's intriguing to see how the characters try to make sense of it, but every character in the group, even Yo-Yo and Charles, talks about moving on to other places and doing new things, so the movie is able to balance the best of both worlds in this regard. Its emphasis as a comedy and fun mystery flick is still made clear though, and one of the things that highlights this the most are its blaxploitation elements. Admittedly, this is something I'm not quite as familiar with, but even just from looking at a few of the visuals in the movie itself, it's clear to see where the movie gets its tone and influence from. Everything from the funk music to the hairstyles and costumes to the film grain aesthetic all contribute to the movie's visual identity. Even the total ridiculousness of the plot itself is a throwback of sorts, and it's just cool to see a movie like this take old school tropes, refashion them, and blend them into a modern world to make them feel unique again. Not everything about how the movie looks is great though. For a good chunk of the first and last act, it feels like most of the cinematography is overly dark, to the point that it's difficult to tell what's happening on screen, and thus difficult to appreciate all the interesting visuals it has, which is a shame because the cinematography itself is framed really well. Maybe it's just a problem with my TV, but I tried changing the brightness and other settings numerous times, and I still couldn't find one that 100% worked for me. It's frustrating because neon lit darkness is something that fits quite well with the tone of a mystery, but unfortunately this movie dives a bit too far into it. I also had a hard time making out certain things that characters were saying. It feels like in every key scene where characters are discussing something important related to the mystery, they're always murmuring it instead of talking at an appropriate volume. Once again, this made things more difficult to follow along with as far as the story was concerned, and subtitles were pretty much a necessity for me. Each of these things had something that balanced them out though. As dark as some of the scenes can be, the more well lit ones set in the cloning labs and in broad daylight were awesome to see, and as quiet as the audio can be sometimes, there's usually an awesome music track playing in the background to enjoy. And like I said earlier, despite all the insane cloning stuff and how fun it is, there is a message behind it, with the black characters wanting to escape their circumstances. It all revolves around how downtrodden black neighborhoods can be and the lack of opportunities within them, which unfortunately is a real problem that exists today. I don't want to speak too much about how it applies in this movie so as to avoid spoilers, but I was pleased with how the movie observed this concept. It presents a subtle and meaningful examination of the repression of black communities by white forces, without shoving it in the viewer's face and still managing to be a good time. Overall, They Cloned Tyrone is a fun mystery comedy that will make the audience laugh as much as it will make them think. If you like mystery movies that have an element of humor behind them and want to watch one that's totally off the wall, you'd enjoy checking this out. It has technical hiccups here and there, but they don't get in the way of the sheer entertainment this movie has to offer. Great characters, fun mystery, and a unique style and homages all make this one of the more original and better comedies to come out on Netflix. It knows where it gets its roots from without coming off as a complete clone. What did you think about this movie? Were you impressed with the way it balanced its humor and story, or did you find it hard to follow along with? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of They Cloned Tyrone. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part where next time I review the American biographical epic thriller, Oppenheimer. Bye bye!